With 39 setbacks in 24 hours. Is Israel losing the Middle East war on yet another front? Not just the hellfire from Iran. Israel stares at deadly attacks launched by Lebanon-based Hezbollah group. Iranian Proxy releases as many as 39 military communiques in 24 hours. Is Israel's losses piling up amid the war? Lebanon-based Hezbollah released a video on March 20th that it said showed attacks carried out the previous day, adding a new layer to the rapidly expanding Israel-Lebanon front. The footage purported to show Hezbollah fighters launching missiles toward Israeli targets, with the group presenting the strike as part of its continuing military response to Israeli operations. The video also claimed to show multiple impacts inside Israel following Hezbollah's latest attacks, even as Israel faces separate attacks from Iran amid war. The Iranian Proxy group also released a statement and as many as 39 military communiques, underscoring the scale of its messaging campaign.
Hezbollah's statement said, and I quote, "In defense of Lebanon and its people, and in support of our steadfast Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip and in support of their brave and honorable resistance, the Islamic Resistance issued 39 military communiques on Thursday, the 19th of March, 2026, regarding operations to confront the movements of the Israeli enemy army at the Lebanese-Palestinian border, as well as operations targeting the positions, bases, and deployment of the Israeli enemy army and its settlements in northern occupied Palestine." Unquote. At 0:05, a Merkava tank was targeted at Baydar al-Fakani in the town of Taba with a guided missile, achieving a direct hit. At 1:10, a gathering of Israel Defense Forces soldiers in Kiryat Manara, opposite Hula, was targeted with a rocket barrage. At 1:15, 3 Merkava tanks were hit by guided missiles in Taba, bringing the total targeted to 4. At 1:30, 2 Merkava tanks were hit by guided missiles in Taba, bringing the total targeted to 6. The fighters continue to target the area with rocket barrages and artillery shells. A third Israeli incursion attempt was reportedly foiled in the Taba area. An Israeli push toward Baydar al-Fakani was halted. Resistance fighters monitored the movement and prepared an ambush in advance. Guided missiles destroyed the first tank involved in the advance, scoring a direct hit. A second advance toward the Abu Makna area near Deir Sarian was targeted again. 5 Merkava tanks were destroyed in that follow-up phase of the clash. Israeli troops were seen fleeing the combat zone after the armored advance came under heavy fire. Helicopters were then deployed to evacuate casualties from the scene. The evacuation zone was subsequently targeted with rockets and artillery. Heavy fire and smoke cover surrounded the extraction effort. At 3 o'clock, Hezbollah targeted Kiryat Shmona with a rocket barrage following its warning. At 3:30, Hezbollah launched a second rocket barrage at Kiryat Shmona following its warning. At 4:20, Hezbollah launched a third rocket barrage at Kiryat Shmona following its warning. At 4:25, the Merkava site, opposite the border town of Odessa, was targeted with a rocket barrage. At 4:30, a gathering of Israel Defense Forces soldiers in Maroun al-Ras Park was targeted with a rocket barrage. At 10 o'clock, the Adadhra site, Mount Adir, was targeted with a rocket barrage. At 10 o'clock, Hezbollah targeted Manara with a rocket barrage following its warning. At 10 o'clock, the Typhoon base, east of the occupied city of Akka, was targeted with a rocket barrage. At 11:30, the newly established site at Namr al-Jamal, opposite the border town of Alma al-Shab, was targeted with a rocket barrage. At 11:30, a gathering of Israeli enemy army soldiers in the Labunah area was targeted with a rocket barrage. At 11:50, Hezbollah targeted Even Munikim with a rocket barrage following its warning. At 12 o'clock, the newly established site at Namr al-Jamal, opposite the border town of Alma al-Shab, was targeted with a swarm of attack drones. At 12:20, Hezbollah fired a fourth rocket barrage at Kiryat Shmona following a prior warning. At 13:50, Hezbollah launched a fifth rocket barrage at Kiryat Shmona following its warning. At 13:50, a gathering of Israeli enemy army soldiers at the Manara site, opposite the border town of Hula, was targeted with a rocket barrage. At 2 p.m., Hezbollah targeted Shtula with a rocket barrage following its warning. At 15:20, Hezbollah launched a sixth rocket barrage at Kiryat Shmona following its warning. At 15:30, a gathering of Israel Defense Forces soldiers near Kfar Yuval was targeted with a swarm of attack drones. At 16:45, a gathering of Israeli enemy army soldiers at Kiryat al-Kasif, southwest of the town of Taba, was targeted with artillery shells. At 16:45, a gathering of Israeli enemy army soldiers in the Taba project was targeted with artillery shells. At 16:45, the Merkava site, opposite the border town of Odessa, was targeted with a rocket barrage. At 1645, a gathering of Israeli enemy army vehicles in Badr al-Fakani in the town of Tabor was targeted with artillery shells. At 5 p.m., the Yodifat military industries company east of the city of Haifa was targeted with a rocket barrage. At 1720, a gathering of Israeli enemy army vehicles in the Tabor project was targeted with artillery shells. At 1720, a gathering of Israeli enemy army soldiers on Al-Muhaizabat Hill, south of the Tabor project, was targeted with artillery shells. At 1725, Hezbollah targeted Margaliot with a rocket barrage following its warning. At 7 p.m., the Hermon site was targeted with a rocket barrage. At 2010, a gathering of Israel Defense Forces soldiers and vehicles in Maroun al-Ras was targeted with a rocket barrage. At 10 p.m., Hezbollah launched a seventh rocket barrage at Kiryat Shmona following its warning. At 22:20, Hezbollah targeted Morkia with a rocket barrage following its warning. At 23:20, a gathering of Israeli enemy army soldiers and vehicles on Al-Qatsan Hill in border town Odessa was targeted with a rocket barrage. At 23:30, a gathering of Israeli enemy army soldiers and vehicles in the Tabor project was targeted with a rocket barrage. At 23:50, a gathering of Israeli enemy army soldiers and vehicles in the border town of Jadada Marjayoun was targeted with a rocket barrage. Over the past 2 days, Hezbollah fighters detonated explosives on an Israel Defense Forces D-9 bulldozer in Tabor and on troops in Atarun, scoring direct hits. Hezbollah added, and I quote, "The Islamic resistance is committed to defending its land and people, especially as the Israeli enemy crosses boundaries with its criminality. Its response has been directed at military sites, unlike the enemy which targets civilians." Unquote.
These Hezbollah attacks came even as Israel launched fresh airstrikes in southern Lebanon, widening pressure on Hezbollah-held and suspected militant-linked areas. The southern Lebanese towns of Baflia and Hanin were among the places hit in the latest Israeli strikes, according to regional reporting citing Lebanon's state news agency. Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth acknowledged on Thursday that the reported $200 billion funding figure for the Iran war could rise, as the Trump administration looks for more resources while the conflict drags on.
Last Friday, Admiral Cooper and the CENTCOM team conducted precision strikes against more than 90 targets on Karg Island, which included all of their military-only infrastructure, which included air defenses, naval base, mine storage, and deployment facilities. And as the Secretary mentioned, we continue to strike against Iran's defense industrial base and will continue to do so. Some of these Americans are in their early or mid-20s, and we give them the gift of this incredible responsibility, hundreds of thousands of pounds of aircraft, and they take off and go do our work as required. Their mission actually begins the day prior when they're given a target or a bunch of targets, and they begin to study those targets, look at what are the effects required, what are the weapons required to get there, how will we program these weapons, what is the weather, what is the tanker flow. It's an incredibly complex problem that we give each and every one of these crews, and they work it over the period of 24 hours prior, get some rest, and then step out the door to go fly. The last thing they do is they check all of their equipment, their oxygen masks, survival gear, load pistols, and get ready to go. They crank the jets about an hour prior to takeoff and then launch into the daylight, doing their pre-flight checks, and as the kids say, lock in and prepare to go to war, sometimes on a long and stressful journey. During the flight, they're surrounded by technology and capabilities, and they'll do multiple aerial refueling efforts across tankers on the way to the AOR, area of responsibility, either coming from the States or coming from a forward deployed basing. And I will tell you, as a fighter pilot, getting gas is a lot easier in an F-16 than it is in a B-1, B-2, or a B-52, where you are handling this airplane. It is a physical thing, unlike a fighter that's a lot easier. And they stay on that boom for sometimes up to 30 minutes, taking hundreds of thousands of pounds of gas. It is a physical, demanding thing to take gas, and they do it multiple times on the way there, and they do it multiple times on the way home. As they enter the operating area, they bring the entirety of America's joint force together to go do the things that we've tasked them to do, to put bombs on time, on target, with the proper effects. And I know they're feeling a range of emotions, but the thing the American people should take away from it is they're filled with a focus that is incredibly impressive. And they have fear, of course, but their bigger fear is, dear God, please don't let me screw this up. The warrior's prayer that we all have in our souls.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Given the updated degradation in strike target numbers you laid out, how close would you say we are towards achieving the president's objectives, and what is the end game of the operation without divulging any sensitive battle plans?
Well, we wouldn't want to set a definitive time frame on that, but as we've said, we're on plan. So we're looking at those metrics very closely, relaying that to the president and the national security team. But feel confident that as, again, we're more stand in means we're over the top, even further in, and we have even more of an exact sense of what we're striking and why, and even more dynamically, meaning because the intelligence improves, we're able to more quickly identify targets when they, let's say they come out of an underground facility where they've been hiding and able to strike it before it strikes or right after it shoots. But we're very much on plan, and that's why I want to speak to the American people here. You hear a lot of noise about widening or new missions or speculation about what we should or should not be doing. This is a clear set of objectives. The president has given us every capability we need to accomplish that. We've got the best in the world in uniform executing it on the ground. They believe in and are invested in this mission, and it will be at the president's choosing, ultimately, where we say, hey, we've achieved what we need to on behalf of the American people to ensure our security. So no time set on that, but we're very much on track.
What countries have been the most cooperative with us, including the Gulf states, as Europe hedges?
As in partners' side, Israel from day one has been an incredible and capable partner, willing and able. There's nothing like capabilities and partners that are able to use them. The Gulf states have stepped up incredibly. In fact, Iran's sort of reckless attempt to strike civilian infrastructure and other things has brought countries who maybe would have not been as all in as they are today squarely into our orbit. And we're proud to be defending with them, standing with them, you name it. UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and others who have been right there. And we're grateful for that kind of support.
As we said and have always said, clearly they came into this fight with a lot of weapons. This is why we continue to be as aggressive and assertive as we can against their ballistic missile capability, both their medium-range ballistic missile capability and their short-range missile capabilities. So we are continuing to hunt and find them and kill them, and we will continue to do so. So they still retain some capability. And we have layered defenses throughout the region that will allow us to protect those. And we're working with our partners across the Gulf region to help them improve any defensive capabilities that they may need.
To that point on capabilities, Iran's an energy-rich country, could be, should be. Instead, like so many other places driven by a radical ideology, they've spent that money instead of investing in their people. This was Iran specifically passing technology and wherewithal and personnel into Iraq to kill Americans specifically. I know the number is said to be 600. A lot of us think it's higher than that, given the amount of capability they brought in. So they have been at war with us, whether we acknowledge it or not, for 47 years. The same goes in Afghanistan. Name the Islamist enemy, whether they are Sunni or Shia, because this is a Shia regime, Sunni or Shia, and Iran's been willing to harbor them as long as that group is willing to try to kill Americans. So the enemy of their enemy has been their friend as well in the Islamist world. So Iran, whether it's Iraq, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's around the world, has been targeting Americans. And what they wanted in this context, and what President Trump would not tolerate, is a regime of that nature being closer and closer to nuclear capabilities, a capability they would have said they would want to use, and we ought believe what our enemies say they would do if they got the most dangerous weapon in the world.
There was a report last night that the Pentagon asked the White House for $200 billion for Iran war supplemental. Can you confirm this, and can you explain why a package this large is necessary?
Well, first of all, none of this would have been possible without Midnight Hammer, without that audacious mission with very clear goals that did obliterate their ability to enrich and the capabilities they have in those facilities. So it created the conditions for Iran to step forward and say, okay, you can reach out and touch us like that in our nuclear ambitions. You can see that we're still trying to do this. Let's make a deal. And President Trump put our two best folks on it, Steve and Jared, and they worked diligently, earnestly. I watched it to try to pursue that deal. And ultimately, I think the whole time Iran sort of said, well, we'll talk. as we build more missiles and as we build more UAVs and we create this conventional umbrella so that if we chose to, we could try to reconstitute the program. And sort of naively thinking that President Trump wouldn't do something about it. And that's why, as Secretary Rubio has said, and I've said, it's the conventional umbrella that was growing and growing and growing that was meant to protect that nuclear capability. So you had to address both what happened with Midnight Hammer and what happened with that as well. As far as $200 billion, I think that number could move, obviously. It takes money to kill bad guys. So we're going back to Congress and our folks there to ensure that we're properly funded for what's been done, for what we may have to do in the future, ensure that our ammunition is everything's refilled, and not just refilled, but above and beyond. I mean, and I think we're also still dealing with the environment that Joe Biden created, which was depleting those stockholds, and not sending them to our own military, but to Ukraine. Which is every time we reach back and look at any sort of a challenge we have, it goes back to, well, send it to Ukraine. Ultimately, we think this should be these munitions are better spent in our own interests at this point.
So with the strike yesterday on South Bar's gas field, if the U.S. didn't know about it or didn't approve of it, it kind of seems like a trend of Israel apparently pursuing their own objectives over U.S. objectives. I'm not sure if you agree with that, but the president has said he doesn't want to hit Iran's oil infrastructure right now. As you said, the U.S. avoided this on Karg Island. Oil's nearing $120. Why are we helping Israel prosecute this war if they're going to pursue their own objectives?
We hold the cards. We have objectives. Those objectives are clear. We have allies pursuing objectives as well. And the truth speaks for itself. I mean, President Trump was very clear about that. Iran has weaponized energy for decades. Israel clearly sent a warning, and POTUS has made it clear, very clear. Iran knows when you hit Karg Island and you hit military capabilities on Karg Island, which is the only thing we hit, we can hold anything at issue, anything. The United States military controls the fate of that country. Iran has the ability to make the right choices. It should not, going forward, target Arab allies, Arab countries, trying to create pain, the pain that they created themselves. Thank you all very much.